Hello, welcome everybody. And this is the latest Green Buildings campaign webinar, whereby we're campaigning for mandatory solar PV and banning of fossil fuels in new buildings. And we've got quite a few signatures to this. There's actually a petition being organised by someone else, but who want to support full mandatory PV on new buildings. And we'll discuss later how this is still very necessary in collaboration with really getting heat pumps in new buildings or banning fossil fuel boilers in new buildings. They're both essential. They shouldn't be in competition with each other. We'll discuss later how there may be some competition, unhelpful competition emerging because of the shape of the regulations. So that is what we're going to talk about, and in various aspects, as well, of course, the energy efficiency dimension in all its forms for new and existing buildings. And we've just produced a report on that, how to organize a real energy efficiency program, which we don't have at the moment, but which we used to have actually in this country. Older people might remember it. Anyhow, what I want to do now is to pass over to Kevin Holland, who has attracted a lot of attention and a lot of business in the solar PV world as an extraordinary entrepreneur and promoter of solar PV in his solar shed.
You've been reading my blog again. Thanks, David. I don't know if I'm an extraordinary entrepreneur. My name's Kevin Holland, and I run a business called The Solar Shed Limited. Basically, I sell solar from a shed. I'm in the shed now. It's a 250-year-old brick-built, single-skinned, uninsulated barn at the bottom of the garden. And I've made it quite homely. And I just want to quickly flick the camera around just to show you what I'm going to be talking about, which is my house. So I don't know if you can see it, but that's my house on that banner there, that roller banner. And it's nestled into the riverbank on the River Great Ouse in a little village just south of King's Lynn. And it's an old fisherman's cottage. It's 500, or two of the rooms are 500 years old. Solid walls, no insulation. When we moved here 18 years ago, we didn't need an EPC, but we got one when I started doing some renewables, and it was a G. So I had an energy performance certificate, G, on this house, and it was costing me money. And in those days, I was a policeman when I moved up here, and even on my wages as a police officer, I couldn't afford to live here. That was in 2008, that was in 2005, 2004, 2005, when we were at war over in the Middle East and oil prices were going through the roof. And if you read the newspapers, there'd be a threat of Russia turning the gas pipes off or the Chinese eating all the world's resources. And oil prices were going through the roof. Not much has changed in those 15 years, I've got to say, when you look at the news today. But I had this old house, oil prices went up to about 70 pence a litre, and I could not afford to heat it. So after a wonderful career in the police, I quit. I quit in the first instance to become a double glazing salesman. I want to pick up on a couple of things that people said in the intro about retrofitting and fabric first. The first rule of any buildings has got to be fabric first. Doesn't matter what the age of the property, you've got to insulate before you generate. You know, if everyone got themselves an energy performance certificate or an updated energy performance certificate and treat it like a shopping list for your house, treat it as a 3 or 4 year plan and start to reduce the energy demands first before you start tackling the actual energy generators like solar, air source and all the rest of it. But we've done this over the years. And after I got my windows fitted, I became a double glazing salesman just to get my windows fitted at cost price. I needed 23 windows and I weren't going to pay their prices. So I became a salesman and got my windows at cost price. And then I got into solar in 2008. As I said, oil prices were going through the roof and I got into thermal solar. I found a bloke who said that he'd give me a free thermal solar system if I sell him £1 million worth of solar. So that's what I did. I wanted a free solar system myself. So I went and sold loads and loads and loads of solar locally in an off-grid or off the gas grid community. I'm very rural in the Fens. The postcode PE34 is extremely big and extremely rural. So I got into renewables basically to displace oil. And the more I learned about the reasons we should do solar, the more it made sense. Because every solar system that we put in reduces the chance of sending kids to war in the Middle East or in Russia, if that's what it comes to. Because if we didn't rely on this imported energy, because the successive governments have sold off our energy left, right, and centre, we don't own it. If we can take control of our own energy and reduce our demand, then we're not so reliant on imported, energy. And it really annoys me that every time we switch a light on, a pensioner in Germany gets richer. That ain't right. That isn't right. We need to stop doing that. We need to stop doing that. So I've gone about retrofitting my house. We've gone from having an open fire, which in those days when I first moved here, the only thing I knew how to burn was coal. And I felt really hypocritical. So then I learned about wood. I learned about dry wood. I learned about storing wood. And we got into wood. And eventually I've got myself a wood burner. And I've done all the internal insulation on the north-facing walls on the house. And 3 weeks ago, I had another EPC done. And I've got myself up to a C rating now. On a 500-year-old house, we've now got a C-rated house for the energy performance certificates. That's taken me a long time to do that, and it's not a small house, and it's cost me a bit of money, but we've done it, and we've done it mainly through insulation and then renewables. So we got ourselves a 4 kilowatt solar system on the house with a 14 kilowatt hour battery or 14 kilowatt of stored capacity. I've got a big battery. And what I want to do is, if I've got the screen sharing facility here, David, I just want to go through a couple of screens and show you what solar means to us. It means to us as a family, not just as someone who sells it to people, but what it means to us. Now, I know I'm preaching to converted, but what I want is for people to take some of these snapshots away and say, when you're in conversation, I met a man who does this, because seeing is believing. So I just want to share a screen or two.
Yes, please share.
Lovely. And the first one I'm going to share is this one. So this is a website called pvoutput.org. Excuse me. pvoutput.org. It's an Australian guy. About 15 years ago, he set this up, and it's basically a web-based Excel spreadsheet. And every single day, people all over the world input solar data. Some of them do it automatically, but that's above my pay grade. They send these little signals from their inverters to the interweb. I don't know how to do that, but I do know how to just input data. And every day I input data onto here for my system on my house. And at the click of a button, I can see how much energy I've generated daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. And we can see this year, actually, we've generated more energy already this year than last year. It's been a wonderful solar year. We've already beaten 2 years ago, and we're just about to beat 3 years ago. So this has been an exceptional year. So we can make comparisons. But what I want to do is concentrate on this. The time of the year when you need the least amount of energy is the time of the year when you're generating the most amount of energy. Yeah. So with solar systems nowadays, most of them have a battery as well. So you store any used energy and you can go 24 hours without taking anything from the grid. There are limits to that, but a lot of people, if they're clever and savvy with their energy usage, you can use 10 to 15 kilowatt hours a day and take very little from the grid. But in the winter months, look, I've got a 4 kilowatt south facing with zero shade. We talk about a 4 kilowatt system because that's the most you're allowed to put back down the grid if you've only got a single phase power supply, unless we get permission from the national grid. Okay, so we talk about a 4 kilowatt system, which would generate in the Midlands about 4,000 kilowatt hours a year. Further north, a little bit less, further south, a little bit more, but about 4,000 kilowatt hours a year. And as you can see, in the summer months, it's fantastic, but in the middle of winter, you might get 3 days, 4 days, 5 days worth of energy over a whole month of generation. So I don't want you leaving here think that solar is the key and the answer to everything. It is only the solution to most of the world's ills, not all of them. We are still going to need wind and we are going to need tidal and all those other factors. And I am going to say it, I'm not a fan of nuclear, but I am a fan of keeping the lights on, especially for hospitals and military bases. So I think we need a strong base load of about 20% in this country, but I'm sure there's other people who are more knowledgeable than me on what we need on energy. But as you can see, in winter, solar is not very good. And I tell my customers, and this is why I'm being honest, because solar was crap for 4 to 5 weeks either side of the shortest day. It really is. A 4 kilowatt solar system, average system in the UK, will generate about 11.5 kilowatt hours of electricity a day over the course of a year. 25 to 27 kilowatt hours on peak days in the middle of summer, and less than 1 in the middle of winter. But it'll average about 11 to 11.5 kilowatt hours a day. So I like to aim for a battery round about the same size. So if we can absorb as much of that energy as we possibly can, we get some rather stark results. And that's what I want to show you next. So this next platform I'm going to show you is a monitoring platform from my own solar system. Now I've got a solar system and I've got a battery system. It's not a hybrid, it's 2 separate systems. And this monitoring just sits over the top of both of them. And what you're looking at the moment is production in blue, how much solar energy we generated today, which wasn't a lot, and how much we've consumed, which I'll have to have a chat with her indoors because it seems to be quite a lot. But I have just had a very, very nice toad in the hole, and that's where the oven was on down here. So we can see what our energy use has been, and we can see what's happening now. So right now in the house, we're using 540 watts, and it's all coming from the grid because my battery's at its idle state, 15% is where I've got mine set. And we're not producing anything because it's dark. As I said, solar's crap at night. But what I want to do is come down here and show you, and I'm going to go back a couple of months to show you what happens. I find August is a really fascinating month. We're starting to get towards the equinox. We're not on those 16 hours of daylight. It's round about the same amount of solar gain as what we get in April. So August and April are quite nice months to show you this. And I'm going to show you 3 different parameters or 3 different energy meter readings, all from my solar system over the month of August of this year. So the first one, what we're looking at there in blue is the solar production of a 4 kilowatt system. And on some days in August, I'm getting over 20 kilowatt hours. 20 kilowatt hours of electricity. That's a lot of energy. I pay 35 pence a kilowatt hour for my energy company. So 20 of them times that by 35 pence, that's £7 worth of electricity a day I'm generating. £7. And I'll go out of my way to use as much of it as possible. One of the examples is last year, I've got a 9-year-old Nissan Leaf. I got it second-hand 7 years ago, 10,000 miles on the clock. It's only got 100-mile range, but we only do to the shops and back, or to the doctors and back, the dentists and back, shops and back. It's all local miles for us. No more than 15, 20 miles on a round trip. So I don't need a big, long car, do I? Cost me £66 last year to do 5,000 miles because all the rest of it come from solar, this stuff that you're looking at here. Now, in August, we also consumed energy. We're not ones for holidays. We don't go away. We haven't flown. I stopped flying, I think it was about 12 years ago. I won't do any unnecessary flying. I will fly, but only if it's necessary. But so we don't have holidays. So our consumption in red can be quite high. And if you have a look at the production days, these high days, it must have been quite hot here because clear skies because we're generating lots of electricity. But that's also replicated with our use in red, our consumption. How much do we use? Well, that's the days when I put the free air conditioning on. Yeah, now we're going to get more and more days of 35 and 40 degree temperatures. You know, the world has waited too long. We've been giving people the warnings for 15, 20 years. We were ignored, so it's now time to adapt and prepare. And if it means me getting some benefits out of climate change, like free air conditioning, I'm going to sing about it, guys. So these are the days when we use a lot of free energy. When we generate a lot of free energy, we tend to use it. I'm not giving it back to the grid for the pittance they give me. I'm going to use it and enhance my lifestyle. But the punchline here is, how much of this energy that we consumed did we purchase because of the solar and battery technology we've got in? That's it, the purple. Day after day after day, this day we used 23 kilowatt hours, but we only purchased 480 watts, about 16 pence worth of electricity. but we use £7.5, £8 worth of electricity. And if every single house had solar and battery systems, every single person would be able to do that.
Okay, another 3 minutes.
85%. Okay.
Another 3 minutes, Kevin.
Over a 7-month period, we'll produce from March through to October, we will produce about 80 to 85% of the energy that we need. And that can be done, I'm talking costs now, for a solar and battery system to do that. People can get away with paying £11,000 to £12,000 to do exactly what I am showing you there. And the amount of carbon, you're talking about, there's a lot of embedded carbon in the products, okay? So I don't want to get into that argument about the environmental cost of a battery. Because once it's there for 20, 30 years. It's just going to keep working. Now, we're talking about just over 2 tons of carbon a year that we're no longer emitting because of this. And then if I use my electricity to give myself heating instead of the oil boiler, or to give myself fuel for the car rather than using diesel, I'm offsetting even more. I'm using that free energy to offset even more carbon. So I might be looking at 5 to 6 tons of carbon a year that my little 4 kilowatt system is reducing. So that's my introduction of what we can do. But basically, I've gone from a G-rated EPC to a C-rated on a 500-year-old house, something I was told will never be achievable. We've done it. I'm happy for any questions.
Okay, look, can we come back to questions later?
Yes.
Really, and would now want to go to Emily Rice from Solar Energy UK, and she is the Scotland policy analyst, and she's going to talk about the role regulation has played in Scotland's solar new build success. And Scotland is important not just because it's Scotland, but also because in its planning of the building regulation reform, it is at least a year ahead of England. And so the issues that are coming up now in Scotland will come up soon, or should come up in England later. So over to you, Emily.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Got some slides. All right. If you can see that, great. So yes, I'll be speaking a bit about the kind of risks and opportunities and lessons that Scottish new build can offer. Oh, hold on. Oh dear.
You'll get there soon, Emily, yes.
All right, can we?
Yes, we can see that.
See that. Perfect.
Yeah, we can see that.
Wonderful. So just quickly to say who we are. So Solar Energy Scotland is the trade body for solar energy in Scotland. We are part of Solar Energy UK. We have about 300 businesses and associate members, almost 50 of which are based in Scotland. And that's, SMEs all the way up to global brands. We lead political engagement. We do research and industry-led policy development. We also run member forums and webinars. So the current solar market in Scotland, we have about 400 megawatts of installed capacity in Scotland. We have another 767 megawatts in the pipeline. It's currently a rooftop market, so mostly commercial and domestic rooftop, although the utility scale solar in Scotland is growing rapidly. We, as an industry, want to see 4 to 6 gigawatts of solar deployed by 2030 in Scotland. And about 1.5 gigawatts of that will come from domestic rooftops. The new build industry in Scotland, as David has said, it's a real Scottish success story. So 25% of MCS accredited installations last year for the UK as a whole happened in Scotland, and that's largely due to the new build sector. Regulations in Scotland have required solar to be installed on new build homes since 2015, which is when we've seen a lot of that growth. And based on EPC data, it's estimated that more than 60% of all homes built in Scotland in 2020 had rooftop solar, although experiences of our membership suggest that this could be as high as 80%, which is truly staggering. It's really goes to show you what regulation can do for, energy efficiency and home renewables. Unfortunately, this may not last. So the introduction of new building regulations and the new build heat standard in Scotland could kill off the Scottish new build industry. So at the moment, the new build heat standard requires zero direct emission heating, ZDEH, but which is like a heat pump or electric heating, something that at the point of use doesn't emit greenhouse gas. But the only mandatory notional house specification, so in the building regulations, new build homes will not be required to have solar if a heat pump is installed. You will only have to put solar on them if there's a gas boiler, but obviously gas boilers are getting phased out. If you don't require solar with a heat pump or other forms of electric heating, developers will not put them on, and there will not be solar on new builds anymore. There's no specification for on-site generation such as solar in the new building regulations, which in conjunction with this new build heat standard means the industry is facing a cliff edge.
Everybody shout boo.
This kind of is out of line, not just with the rest of the UK, but also national building regulations across the EU. Because this standard, despite being SAP-based, just does not recognize the value of on-site and exported generation. It's not, this is going to end, and we don't want the same thing to happen in England and Wales. Obviously, we want there to continue to be regulation. We want there to be regulation in England and Wales that requires solar. So I wanted to get that out of the way first because I didn't want to be all doom and gloom at the end of the presentation. I definitely want to say why this is so important, not just from an industry perspective, but to meet all of the goals that we have in Scotland. Clearly, regulation worked in 2015. Building regulations required there to be new build on solar or incentivized new build on solar, and we've seen huge amounts of solar go up in Scotland on new build homes since. So recently we've published a comprehensive report on the running costs of combining solar with a low carbon heating. So retrofitting a solar system could offer about £3,000 per year over the lifetime of the system, depending on the heating system used for a home that's highly energy efficient. And that's retrofit. So it's cheaper to fit a system on when it's built. So we think those figures will be higher for new build. But under every scenario tested, the best financial performance is delivered by solar and modern heating, like a heat pump, infrared heating. Scotland-specific modeling showed a 21% reduction in energy costs with electric heating and a 37% reduction in annual costs with a heat pump in a highly efficient home. So those are huge cost savings. And if we're really missing an opportunity here, if regulation doesn't continue to pair heat pumps and solar together. We're not saying that obviously solar is going to solve all of the problems that we have, but neither will heat pumps. And putting these two technologies together really is the most effective way to not only reduce demand, but also reduce costs for homeowners, which I think is the end goal.
Bravo.
Research that we did a couple years ago with the Center for Renewable Energy Systems and Technology at Loughborough University showed that if we deliver 4.4 million homes UK-wide with solar and energy storage, we could help eliminate the evening peak electricity demand on a typical winter's day. So not just during the summer, but during the winter as well. That's my presentation. I will share these slides with David and he can send them all to you. And I've just got some reports linked here. So we've got smart solar homes, the value of solar heat, and we will be publishing a Scotland specific briefing soon that will have kind of all of the different scenarios for Scotland. But this value of solar heat does have scenarios for new builds across the UK. So I would encourage you to check that out. And also the value of solar property. So if that goes into analysis on if you're retrofitting your home, how solar can add to the value of your property. And I'm happy to take any questions as well.
great. If we could hold on to the questions, if you could hang around along with Kevin, that would be
Of
great.
course.
If we could move on to our next speaker now, and I think it's, but I would add, before Andrew Warren comes in, our next speaker, you've put your nail on the key thing. At the moment, the regulations are hopscotching between solar PV in effect and heat pumps. And yes, we want storage there in their batteries, and we want also much improved fabric efficiency, you know, preferably passive solar and all that. So, but we need to push this petition that we've got for solar PV and heat pumps to be mandatory in new buildings. Anyway, having said that, over to Andrew Warren. Now, Andrew Warren is the great originator of the energy efficiency movement in the UK, and he is chair of the British Energy Efficiency Federation these days, having founded the Association for the Conservation of Energy many years ago and fought various fantastic battles. So anyway, Andrew Warren, over to you.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Andrew Warren. I deny most of what David has just said, but while we're on a mutual adjuratory thing, let me pay tribute to the work that David has done when he was at the University of Birmingham and now at the University of Aberdeen. And also...
Andrew, can I cut in here? The light's shining on your face at the moment. You're...
Is it? Okay, I've just done a different one with exactly the same lighting, so I'm not quite sure. Is it still shining on my face?
Yes.
Oh, hold on a second. Oh, that's very strange.
Yes, and Andrew, one of the main movers behind when we used to have a real energy efficiency program, at least.
Well, yes, I was going to say, if he's had to put on another sort of lighting, perhaps he isn't. Is that any better? He said.
Slightly, it's still rather bright, but carry on, please.
I've just been doing stuff with California, and perhaps it's just lighted there. I will.
Well, you know what they say about the sunshine. No, the sunny California. Sorry, the sunshine state Florida.
Yes, I'm not picking up anything at all, so I can't even see what I'm doing at the moment on this thing. Look, anyway, I was paying tribute to David, and he recently published actually a very good paper indeed, which is on his website, on what we need to do for energy efficiency in this country. And I do commend it to you. I mean, broadly speaking, David has just put his finger on the complication with this, which is that energy efficiency was, as we stuck to the position of about 10 years or so ago, acknowledged to be working and effective. In other words, there was no suggestion that it wasn't an absolutely critical part of our energy infrastructure. Are you seeing me any better yet? Yes, good. Broadly speaking, I mean, I've always divided effective energy saving programs into having three mutually supportive facets in order to succeed. And in fact, it is rather like getting donkeys moving. Now, in the case of donkeys, you need initiatives that are basically required, could be described simply as carrots, which are essentially to encourage greater action, sticks, which are to enforce greater action, and the third one is a tambourine bashing away in order to alert a donkey to take action. Now, actually, at the start of this century, effectively, UK energy policymakers understood that symbiosis. And we had grants programs that you can probably recall. We had public information programs. And the whole concept and various tax breaks and so forth, both for industry and for households. And was that between 2000 and 2015, we saw enormous drops in the final consumption of all types of fuels, so by about 16%. In the case of natural gas, closer to 33%. The trouble is that since 2015, and I'm sure this is, well, I am not sure that it's because the Conservatives assumed full powers in them, but since that time, there has been very little action indeed on energy efficiency, culminating in having Mr. Rees-Mogg as the relevant minister. One of the things that I am concerned to do, though, is to recognise, since both the previous speakers have talked about energy performance certificates, someone's obviously having trouble with their microphone, about energy performance certificates, is just how important upgrading EPCs are for, obviously for ecological reasons, but actually at the moment, a much more critical is.
Yes, can everybody mute themselves apart from whoever's speaking, which is Andrew?
I would be very grateful. Thank you. Whoever it was who was, I think it sounded like mice in the place. Because, I mean, when energy performance certificates came in, which did so as a result of a piece of European legislation that actually chaired the original working party on, called the Energy Performance Buildings Directive. And they came in force effectively now 15 years or so ago. And I think they were regarded by most people at the time as a fairly useless piece of bump, and nobody bothered to read the thing, and no one was very interested in the certificate and so forth and what it was and so forth. Possible exception of Kevin, who was talking to us earlier, who obviously did realise that he'd got a G-rated building. But for the most part, nobody paid a lot of attention to it. Now, however, whenever a building comes up for sale, or indeed when it changes tenancy, so for change of rent, the details do have to be made available to the new occupant, and particularly if there's a lawyer involved, they undoubtedly will be included, and people's attention will be drawn to it. And we do to such things as all advertisements placed by estate agents must include those details. Now, I cite to you just this, just in terms of the importance of this, and at the risk of this sounding, there's obviously somebody wrestling in the background, at the risk of this sounding a bit like a praise of all academics on this, but there is a remarkable thing called the Smart Energy Research Lab at University College London, which has been doing a whole lot of practical work on existing homes and measuring energy use in existing homes, 13,000 of them, because whilst I fully understand the desire to get things done on the building regulations as they affect new homes, the fact remains that by the middle of this century, most of the homes, indeed the vast bulk of the homes, probably 70% of the homes that will be being lived in, are already built. So we do have to be concerned with improving the existing building stock, which, as we were reminded in the Financial Times today, is actually now reckoned to be infinitely the least energy efficient in Western Europe, simply because we've done so little about it, particularly over the last decade or so. Anyway, going back to the University College London report, they were saying, well, we know that nobody can let out a building now by law, which is an F or G rated, and they can also buy one, it would appear, if they want to, but certainly we are getting rid of most of the gas guzzlers in the rented market. But what is very interesting is to look at, for instance, the big difference that is made between the sort of next ones up, the E-rated buildings, and the C-rated buildings, which, according to the government, is their aspiration for all residential buildings by well, it moves. Sometimes it's the end of the decade and sometimes it's 2035, but it is at any rate their aspiration within a decade or so to be able to get us to see. I would just say in parenthesis, and I know this is not the topic we're discussing at the moment, but for non-residential buildings, that's going to be a B-rated building. Why residential buildings can't be as good, why our offices and our shops and so forth and theatres are going to be that much more energy efficient than our homes, I leave with you to decide. But I think that it's worth doing, and I apologize actually for not having put this onto a slide, because I probably should have done, but broadly speaking, we are talking about the difference between the average E-rated house. Last year, this is 13,000 homes that were being measured. The average E-rated home used 31% more electricity and 52% more gas than the average C-rated home. This is not the perfect homes that we're going to be building, the A's, sometimes B's of the new building regulations. This is a reasonably good existing home of the type that Kevin is talking about. He's got his up from a G to a C. But that difference of 52% more gas, 31% more electricity means that the average fuel payer is at current prices, and this is with the current subsidies, which tomorrow we're probably going to hear from the Chancellor will be reduced for most householders other than those genuinely in fuel poverty. That is at least a difference on current prices of over £1,000 a year from not having moved to from an E-rated building to a C-rated building. And indeed, a D-rated building that uses 27% more gas as opposed to 57% more gas and 18% more electricity as opposed to 31% more electricity. I mean, what I'm basically trying to say to you is that we do have an enormous potential here for saving people a lot of money. We will be saving, obviously, on fossil fuels, and we'll be saving on carbon dioxide emissions and methane emissions and so forth. But the issues that really do concern everybody today must be the cost of fuel. Now, I saw, and I suppose I should rejoice at a sinner on this who is repenting, but there was a piece in the Times today in the Red Box from the Right Honourable Andrea Leadsom, MP, who some of you will recall was the Energy Secretary under Theresa May. And she was making a great case for greater energy efficiency. I'm going to actually read it to you because it's, I mean, I thought to myself, dear God, I could have written it. I only wish it was something that she had practiced when she was, in fact, the Energy Secretary, saying there is a low-hanging fruit the government should focus on, which is that more efficient use of energy can make our economy more productive and also boost economic activity. Then she had the temerity to say, in previous decades, energy efficiency alone has accounted for up to 25% of this country's economic growth. In other words, stopping energy wastage has given us that proportion of our previous GDP growth, 25%. And she then goes on to say, in addition, warm homes keep us healthier and therefore more productive. And poor health from poor housing costs the NHS 1.4 billion every year. And that, I think, is an underrepresentation now. Given the cost of fuel, it's probably now well over 2 billion. It's just costing because of the poor health. And a number of you will have seen yesterday about the small child in Manchester who died as a result of mold being found in that home. And we know that there are approaching 1 million other households in exactly that same state. That's why the NHS has this high bill from having to deal with poor housing costs. So the focus on energy efficiency, I'm back to Dame Andrea Leadsom, the former Energy Secretary on this. A focus on energy efficiency has 3 major benefits. First, with the price guarantee to support the most vulnerable next year, greater energy efficiency would help to reduce the cost of bills borne by the taxpayer, insulating us from future shocks. In other words, I mean, we're not told what the total bill is, but it's probably 40, 45 billion that the government is subsidizing us all at the moment during this calendar year, subsidizing our fuel bills. Now that's not going to continue. After tomorrow, we will know exactly how much it's not going to continue. But if you like, the less people waste energy, the less the cost is to the exchequer, which ought to mean that the Treasury was more interested. The second point, and again, this is Dame Andrea, a drive for efficiency is a drive for growth and jobs, particularly in the small businesses dotted around the country that make up the army of installers and fitters. And just as we heard about the fact that there are a lot of small companies involved with installing solar in Scotland, sort of people who would be improving windows, going back to Kevin's old job, the people who would be installing insulation. And so all of them are likely to be working for very small companies. And of course,
3 minutes, Andrew.
Well, that's good, because I'm coming to my third point on this, which is that, and I think this is probably the most important in the context. Dame Andrea goes on to say, third, energy efficiency will have a major impact in reducing usage, and so could significantly cut our need to import gas. I've been mortified by the way in which we've dealt with the problems with the sevenfold increase in gas wholesale prices. And it has been by mostly just simply saying we're going to try and build up our stocks. We're talking one stage about going in for fracking, about the silliest thing you could do in practice, but in terms of cost effectiveness. But you know, we're bribing the BPs and the Shells of this world to go out and get yet more gas in. But actually, the best answer to this is summed up and in a position from the Financial Times' chief features writer, Henry Mance, just produced a tweet about what we should do about substituting for gas imports. And he said, it's simple, cut gas use. We can do that, obviously, by switching into electricity generation. We can do that via solar panels, but actually the most sensible way to do it is the way that we were attempting to do it, and the way in which I have to say all other European countries are now adopting, which is to try during this winter in particular to cut our overall use. Across Europe now, the European Union, we are cutting gas use by 15%, electricity use by 10%. That is actually, it's happening. It's not just an aspiration, it is happening. What is happening here? There are no aspirations at all. And I suspect that were this gathering to happen tomorrow night, we would not find that actually they'd suddenly discovered that energy efficiency was what the International Energy Agency calls it, the first priority for dealing with both our economic problems, our supply problems, and our ecological problems. It is our first priority, and it needs to be that continuously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andrew. And I'm going to go on to talk about energy efficiency in the report we just produced. But before I do, there's been a very interesting discussion on the chat line. And I agree with Rick's comments about how it doesn't matter so much that solar doesn't produce so much in winter. And our report, which we're going to come out, which summarizes what the model that we commissioned LUT to do, will say a lot more about this. And of course, Germany stores, as we now know, to our cost, because it's what this country doesn't do, methane in the summer and in vast caverns. We can do the same with renewable energy. Actually, in methane produced from renewable electricity, that's for various reasons, because you need much less volume to store methane than you hydrogen. Anyway, I'm going to diverge if I start going on about that too much. But what I will do now is talk about the energy efficiency program, and I will move on to that now. How to organize a real energy efficiency program. And I'm going to introduce first a chart that Jan Rosenau does lots of brilliant research. And this just shows you how the payback periods for energy efficiency retrofits has shortened tremendously because of the fuel crisis. And I was somewhat, to be honest, I know Andrew mentioned this feature in the Financial Times. I was somewhat annoyed by that because it showed payback periods that are about twice as long as they actually are. And this is a bias against energy efficiency, but really, and I agree with Jan Rosenau, for now, the payback period for cavity wall installation is about 3 years. Loft installation, maybe four years. And I'll show you, well, what people don't count in energy efficiency is that there's this, this perennial argument, people come out with this as though you've never heard of it before, that a lot of people take the savings of energy efficiency and increased comfort so that they can make the amount of money that they've got to spend on energy go farther in keeping them warmer. And this tends to, people say, oh, well, this isn't saving energy, it's improving people's lives, which is what we need to do at the moment. And the various research suggests that actually, on average, a given insulation measure only produces direct energy savings of about 50% of what it should, but the rest is taken in comfort saving, and that is helping us. So you need to count both the comfort savings and the energy savings towards any payback in investment. Otherwise, you're being biased against energy efficiency as a provider of what is life-saving essential services. And you'll see here, this is chosen cavity wall insulation here, which will have a total payback of somewhat over £300 a year at current natural gas prices, what they are at the moment. And maybe you can get various, according to the size of the house, maybe you can get cavity wall insulation for around £1,000. So that's a payback of about 3 years. Not bad at the moment. And of course, gas prices are going to carry on being quite high, even after hopefully this terrible invasion of Ukraine by the Russians is over and done with. It'll carry on for quite some time because there are other global factors as well coming into this, because there's a shortage of liquefied natural gas on the world market. I'm not going to go into all that, but there is, and we'll have to pay back the money that was effectively borrowed to survive the current period. So these prices are going to carry on, I'm afraid. But the other side of it is insulation energy efficiency investments are going to continue to be that much more powerful. This is from the Committee on Climate Change. You can see the last years of what was the Labour government's programme. It started in 2008, and you can compare the levels of insulation that were happening there, finished in 2012, with what's happened since. And energy efficiency spending was cut when David Cameron announced he was cutting the green crap, and it really is costing a lot of people a lot of money as a result today. And you can see what the Committee on Climate Change proposes should be a good program in the years coming in terms of loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, and some solid wall insulation. There's other measures as well. And then, of course, there's heat pumps. And this is me smiling next to our heat pump, which we've got churning away, not using much electricity to keep me nice and warm at the moment. And so what we need to do with the things, what do we need to do to implement these things, is to beef up what we've had in the past and what we've got in the sort of small form still. That is an energy company obligation on energy suppliers to achieve a set number of energy efficiency objectives. It worked well in the past. It can work well again. It can work to get heat pumps installed as well. And I must say, much more cheaply than the current retrofit system, because the incentive system is different. At the moment, I mean, they do a very good job, of course, but the installers have no incentive to cut costs. But if you give companies, the energy companies themselves, a target and a budget to do things, they have an incentive to cut their costs as much as possible, as opposed to selling them from as a higher price as possible, which is what the current installers have as their incentive. And you'll get a much cheaper program as a result. Of course, heat pumps are much the cheapest when they're installed in new buildings, of course, and Rick Greenough has done that. Even on a single house, he's demonstrated that together with solar panels doesn't increase the price of the house very much at all. And we published some key recommendations, which are basic political things like having a Minister of State in charge of energy efficiency. That doesn't exist at the moment. There isn't an energy efficiency directorate headed by a senior civil servant at the moment. There isn't, you should have, preferably, a separate Department of Energy and Climate Change, of course. The Energy Saving Trust used to do a great job at advising. It's now been stripped to the bone and forced to be a private company. It should be renationalized. We've got to set energy efficiency targets for homes, like those suggested by the Committee on Climate Change, have energy company obligations that are really big. And you've got to talk to the industries and the trades and organizations, talk to them and build up a scheme that works. And this is a process that takes a bit of time, as opposed to this government's failed attempts when they have tried to do things. They've appointed a consultant who haven't talked to these people, haven't talked to the industries and the trades and so on to get together a scheme, things that work. So it fails. And we need effective trading programs and so on and so forth. We need an energy company obligation for heat pumps as well. We've got to introduce legislation both to ban fossil fuel boilers from 2024, but also to make solar PV on rooftops mandatory. And they're doing this, they're doing it already in various parts of the continent, and it's being introduced in the EU. So, and we've got to do other things like make sure district heating systems are supplied by large-scale heat pumps. And I'll end there and open this out